So I'll take a few questions, and then I'll turn you back over to the rest of the agenda. And if you ask a question, can you please identify yourselves?
Thank you very much. My name is Prosper Ishimwe. I'm interning with the Africa Center for Strategic Studies, and I go to the University of Maine, Orono. My question is, how do you balance your strategic interests with encouraging democracy? And how do you incentivize democracy, and how has that been working for you?
I think it's easy to balance our strategic interests because our strategic interest is to promote democracy on the continent of Africa because it's a core value for us. It is what we believe will lead to Africa's success in the future. It is a principle that allows African countries to listen to their people and address the needs of their people moving forward. It's challenging to promote democracy because you have a lot of people who don't believe in the core values that democracy provide. But we also have to incentivize them, encourage them, but also hold them accountable. And that's the other side of promoting democracy. For those people who commit human rights violations, for those people who make efforts to extend their terms in office beyond their constitutional limits, we have to make sure that they understand that there are consequences to that for their people. Their decisions, such as in Burundi, the decision by President Nkurunziza to run for a third term. I don't think he wanted to be head of a country that was imploding around him, a country that was almost ungovernable. Those are the kinds of consequences that leaders have to face when they make these wrong decisions.
Steve McDonald, a Global Fellow at the Wilson Center. Linda, all of us were thrilled at the Africa Leaders Summit, obviously. We also thought it was long overdue. We all know the Chinese, Japanese, European Union, et cetera, have been doing this for a long time. I'm concerned that you say you're going to leave a recommendation that this be continued. They all have offices within their foreign ministries that plan this, that are permanent, planning this years and years in advance. What are we doing precisely to make sure this continues? Because it's massively important to have a head of state interaction and dialogue on a regular basis.
Yeah, it has not become institutionalized. I think we have to be honest. President Obama hosted the first one. I think we saw the success of this. African leaders saw the success, and I think there's a strong sense within the State Department and within other government agencies that this must continue. But it does require a recommendation to the next administration, and maybe by the second African Leaders Summit, it's institutionalized. And that's our hope, that it becomes institutionalized, so it's like APEC or any of the other regional summits that take place around the world. So I get your point that recommendations make it seem as if it's not going to happen. I'm confident that it will happen. I think the new administration will see the benefits that accrued when we hosted the last one. Yes.
Chana Koulibaly is my name. I'm the ambassador of Mali, and I thank you very much for your speech, and I thank the United States for the help you're doing for my country. I think one of the successes is also the signature of a peace agreement in Mali. You said that you have not done the things you have supported, and I know that your country has very much supported the negotiation in Alger. So what I would like to suggest is just also on both grounds, on the success ground and also on the legacy ground, the help you're doing for the security matters also is in it. Do you agree with me?
Good, thank you. And we did work very closely with our partners in the region to support the Algiers' efforts to bring peace to Mali, and we continue to work on that. It remains a high priority for us. Any other questions? Kathy.
And I would just like to ask, we've got the big democracies that we really care about, And some of them are very difficult partners. For example, South Africa. I would love to come up with some recommendations or some thoughts about how we can better work with a difficult partner that nonetheless shares really core values with us over the next few years, and what sorts of recommendations and legacies can we leave on that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and you know that we've all been thinking about how do we put our relationship with South Africa back into a much smoother connection. And part of it is, again, I think that the South Africans have been very internally focused at their domestic situation, but South Africa is a key partner, and it also has a key role to play globally. They are a leader on the continent of Africa. So we do have to work with them to ensure that they take on their leadership role, they appreciate their leadership role on the continent, and that they know that we appreciate their leadership role on the continent. So we're looking at opportunities to engage with South Africa over the coming months to set this back on track.
Tony Carroll, Manchester Trade. Thank you, Secretary. As a person who's worked in Africa perhaps as long as you, I try to take a look back at some of the trends that concern me going forward into the new administration. And whilst this great success of YALI is certainly a hallmark accomplishment for this administration, I also worry about meeting the expectations of youth in Africa. I think this is a big problem. And I think one of the issues that constrains, or I think has concerns for us going forward, is the slowness in economic reform to allow this entrepreneurship to really flourish in African countries. I think we're going to be in a real problem unless we can really unleash the entrepreneurship and drive of this next generation of Africans. And I don't think the enabling environment reforms, as a private sector person, are happening fast enough clip to make that not be a train wreck down the road.
Yeah, I can't disagree with what you're saying. I think we have certainly recognized that. Part of the YALI program, one of the focus areas is entrepreneurship, and these young people are moving very rapidly into the private sector. The problem is convincing governments that they have to support them, getting them the seed money that they need to invest in their companies, getting the banking system to work for them. And then the other key part is the education system. We have to work to improve Africa's education system. We all know, those of us who worked and lived and studied in Africa in the 1970s, that Africa's universities were premier. They were excellent universities. We saw students coming from across Africa who were on par with any student in graduate school who'd graduated from an American university. Those universities, in many cases, are not functioning anymore, and they're not producing the scholars and the educated people that we would expect to come out of Africa. So there are a lot of challenges moving forward. So creating jobs, building on the entrepreneurial spirit that we see among these young people, and building the education system so that they have people who are prepared to work. These are all key issues that we continue to work on. I have to tell you that on a regular basis, we are robbing from Peter to pay Paul to support these programs. I will be defending the AF budget at 3 o'clock today with my AID colleague. Again, we're trying to pick the priorities of the priorities. Do we take money from education and give it to democracy and governance? And my answer is no, because they're both priorities, and they're both high priorities, and if you don't have an educated population, it's going to be hard to promote democracy. So they're very connected to each other. So I get it, and look forward to all of you advocating for and supporting our efforts on the Hill to ensure in the future that we have the resources that we need to support these key programs. I will take one more question. I see one in the back of the room.
Yes. Good morning, Larry Hanauer from the RAND Corporation. I wonder if you could just summarize the State Department's view of what China is doing in the continent, not just economically, but also in terms of its growing military role in the region through bilateral military sales and its new logistics hub in Djibouti. And if you could suggest whether there are any opportunities for us to collaborate with China in the region, given that Africa never really seems to raise up to the senior level bilateral U.S.-Chinese dialogue.
You know, the Chinese are moving fast and furiously on the continent of Africa. They have a very mercantilist, but also a very self-interested approach to what they are doing on the continent. But we are noticing that they also are more and more looking at how to make sure they're doing it right. They have not been 100% successful. We've seen huge white elephant projects. They have been taken for a ride across the continent in some of their efforts to promote the private sector. So they're engaging with us more to learn lessons from us, and we're also equally trying to learn lessons from them to ensure, one, that when they do it right for the benefit of the people of Africa. I have an annual consultation with the Chinese. I was just there in December. One of the interesting things that I noticed in that consultation, after having done this many times previously with the Chinese, they did not use the phrase, we don't interfere in the internal politics of Africa. I waited for it. I kind of had it in all my notes, looking for it, waiting to respond, and they did not say it. But what they did talk to us about were issues of democracy and governance. They have been very engaged with our special envoy in South Sudan because, again, they have interests there that they want to protect. I'm not in any way Pollyannish in terms of thinking that their interests are not in competition with our interests, and we certainly have to be cautious as we move forward. But I think that, again, as I said earlier, the opportunities are immense, the resources are immense, and if African countries can negotiate with the Chinese to get what their people need moving forward, we should not stand in the way of that. But at the same time, we should continue to try to ensure that their companies are more responsible, that they take their responsibilities to the people more seriously, and that African countries are holding them accountable. When they pay bribes, it makes it harder for our companies to get business. And so we're constantly working with African governments to ensure that American companies get a fair shake on the continent of Africa in competition with Chinese companies that don't have the same constraints that American companies have on them in doing business there. Let me thank all of you again. I wish you the best of luck for the rest of the day. I am very sorry that I can't remain, but I look forward to the results of your discussion, and I look forward to hearing from you again. Thank you.